Here's a quick introduction to the Industrial Revolution of the early 1800s. We're working on Unit 2, The Nation Grows, where there are some huge changes in American society and culture. You'll see we're leaving an old way, heading to a new way of doing a lot of things, and this lesson is about how we make stuff, manufacture things. The old way was known as the cottage system, where people would pretty much make things at home by themselves by hand, not using machinery to make products. In this case, they're showing the boss brings the raw materials like cotton to his workers' cottages or houses, drops them off. A few weeks later, he comes back to each one and picks up the finished products, takes them into town to sell at stores or whatever. Not always a great thing. I mean, sure, it's great. You get to work at home and you don't have to leave your house and whatever. But for the boss, this is kind of hard because you can't really control your workers. Some people might work a lot, some people may not work much at all. You never really know what you're going to get. For workers, well, you never know too. Is the boss coming on time? Are you going to get paid a fair rate? Oh, maybe you can't work for some reason, then you're kind of out of luck. So the cottage system has its advantages, but also some disadvantages. This family is working at home. You see, grandma looks like is doing something. Maybe looks like a daughter's doing something. Maybe mom. They're working with simple machinery at home to make the products that they are paid to make. Well, the new way is the factory system. We're going to have a huge industrial revolution in the early 1800s where we're going to change the way we make products from cottage system to factory system. And the first industry to be affected by this is the textile industry or cloth making industry. Textiles are materials. We're going to go from little grandma spinning at home to big, huge machines making cloth much, much faster and a much more complex patterns, more interesting patterns. So there are a bunch of inventions that make this work, from going from a loom that you might have at your house to huge machinery looms. So James Hargreaves invented a thing called a spinning jenny. Jenny doesn't really mean a woman's name. It means any kind of machine was called an engine, and so Jenny is an abbreviation for the word engine. Richard Arkwright uh, figured out a way to make thread by using a big water-powered machine. These big wheels in the background are being turned by water, stream outside the building, and making cloth inside the building. There's another steam-powered loom that comes along later that's even faster. Eli Whitney is a big name. He invented a thing called the cotton gin. Eli Whitney was a northerner, but he was in the South, saw slaves picking the seeds out of cotton by hand, realized that was a really slow process. He invented a machine that would do that. You dump the cotton in, you turn a crank, and out comes the finished product minus the seeds. It made cotton growing much more profitable, but unfortunately made slavery much more profitable at the same time. Slavery might have been dying out, except for Eli Whitney's invention of the cotton gin. James Watt improved the design of steam engines, which could make machines work faster. Here's a high pressure steam engine. All these things are important for making the Industrial Revolution work. And so, if you are the owner of a factory, what you do is you have all the machinery in one building and you own it. You bring the workers to you. Rather than taking materials to workers' houses and having them assemble it or work on it or whatever as they please in the cottage system, now manufacturing is done in a building called a factory. Kind of get the idea? Manufacturing, factory. So you can see in the pictures here, big buildings that are where we're going to be making products. Before the American Revolution, the colonies had always depended on Great Britain for manufactured goods. That's where this Industrial Revolution started, not here in the United States. The first successful cotton mill in the U.S., there it is, in Massachusetts, was established by this man named Samuel Slater. He had lived in England. He had worked in a cotton mill. He realized that there was an opportunity for him in America. Trouble was, taking industrial secrets out of England in those days was a crime punishable by death. They could execute you for selling secrets or writing down how a factory works or putting designs on paper. So he memorized all of it, the whole way a factory works and how all the machines work, came to the United States, put all that information down on paper, and was the beginning of cotton mills here in the US. So he brought those production secrets from England. And a lot of people then took up the idea. Francis Lowell built power looms in Lowell, Massachusetts, was well known for its big industry. There's one of his factories at Waltham, Massachusetts. Big, huge building, big water supply because you needed water supply to run the machinery. Lots of windows because we didn't have electric lights yet. So you have to have daylight in your building so your workers can work. One of the earlier supporters of the use of interchangeable parts was Eli Whitney again, same man who invented the cotton gin. He figured out that if machines could make the parts for machines, they would all be exactly the same. And so that made machines much more profitable. If a part broke, you just pop in another one. You didn't have to go back to the original manufacturer for individual pieces. There's good news about the factory system for workers. You get paid a consistent wage. You probably know how much money you're going to make every hour or by every piece of material you make. You'd have a steady work schedule, and that's good. A lot of people like that. No longer are we dependent on farming and the weather for our income. You can work in a factory and you know what you're going to make and you know what your work schedule is going to be. You get to work with other people, which is often a benefit. You may like working with other people. You have a chance to talk with people or hang out or have friends at work, which maybe you didn't have back on the farm. Also, if you do a certain small piece of a job, you get better at it. You get faster, and a job is pretty easy, although maybe a little boring. Bad news for workers. A lot of workers in factories work in unsafe conditions. There's no such thing as OSHA yet, the government agency that protects workers for their safety at work. You'd have long, long days, 12 to 14 hours a day, a 6-day work week. No such thing as a 5-day work week with an 8-hour day like we're accustomed to now. Children often worked in really dangerous, low paid jobs and couldn't go to school. And you might say, oh, that's great. I'll go to work and not go to school. Well, there's a lot of disadvantages to not having an education. In response to working conditions being so bad and hours being long and conditions being unsafe, labor unions eventually started. That's a story for later on in this class, not really for the early 1800s, but later on, labor unions will be a big deal to help workers get better pay, better working conditions, and overall lead a better life. So the spread of the factory system caused cities to grow. We don't need that many people on the farm anymore because of some farming inventions. And so cities become fast growing places. That's great. Interesting life in cities, a lot of things to do. There are some disadvantages like having clean water, fire protection is really an issue, and all kinds of things. But it's not all perfect. If we were in class right now, we'd do an assembly line. We'd show you how this works. We'd have you assemble the different parts of a Conestoga wagon. It'd be divided up into different factories, and somebody would be making the wheels, and someone making the wagon box, and someone making the bonnet, someone making the tongue. You'd be assembling all that. It would show you that once you worked on your part for a little while, you get better at it and faster, and maybe your factory would be able to pump out a lot of these wagons. Of course, they'd have to pass a quality control test to see if they were good enough. If they're not good, you can't sell them. So unfortunately, today we don't have that opportunity to be the assembly line, see which factory could make the most products with the best quality in the time allowed. So the bottom line for today, Industrial Revolution is one of those huge changes in American society, changing from cottage system of manufacturing, where we make our products at home by hand by ourselves, very slowly, to a factory system of manufacturing, where employers build buildings, put machinery in them, and have workers come to them, where ultimately we make products much better and much faster, which makes them much, much cheaper. So that's our lesson for today. You'll read about some of these people in the activities that follow and come up next.